Hey, how's it going, guys? This is your boy Hazzed, and today we're going to be going over a PvE guide using the Obliterate slash Frostscythe spec in just basically PvE slash raid environments. Now, I'll show you a variation of it that's also better in, of course, raiding than using Frostscythe, because Frostscythe is really great for AoE, but not so much the single target DPS. So we're going to go over this spec, which is absolutely amazing for consistent damage, and of course really great for Mythic Plus, and of course just running Mythics in general. So anyways, guys, let's go ahead and jump into this. Here we got the talents we're going to be using, but first I'm going to explain why I went from using the breath spec to using, of course, this spec in PvE and raid environments. As I started to progress, of course, through normals. Normals were easy with the breath spec. I didn't have any problems. My DPS was fine. But as we started to push through heroics and the bosses kind of elongated, I noticed that my consistency, of course, was a lot lower because of my peaks were really in the beginning where I stacked a lot of my DPS. And of course, when I started to push through bigger keystones, I started to notice that my burst was kind of lacking on some of the pulls, but I mean, I had amazing DPS on some of the other pulls. And then, of course, the buff came around, the overall buff with buff Frostscythe, Frost Strike, Obliterate, absolutely everything, Remorseless Winter, making it so I didn't have to reside on this major burst all the time to keep up with all the other classes. So basically, I switched over to using this spec in like Mythic 5 Keystones. I think I did. Yeah, we completed a Mythic 5 in time yesterday. It was pretty fun. I've completed full raid, of course, using this spec, and down heroic, one of the heroic bosses using it. It's really not that hard to use this spec at all, honestly. And talking about DPS wise, when consistently, I'd say in PvE, when you're pulling AoE pulls that are 3 or more, you should be doing from about 3 to 400k consistently, and can spike anywhere near from 6, 7 to 800k, determining how big the pull is. And if it's big enough and you use your cooldowns correctly and rotate them through the dungeon, like I'm going to explain soon, you could be doing this on almost every single pull. So it ends up being absolutely amazing for grinding down trash mobs. There isn't much downtime because of one of the talents. And overall, your DPS should end at the end of the dungeon, at least around my item level and my setup. I end the Mythic Pluses around 4 to 500k overall, which is pretty good, especially, I mean, for a Frost DK, what we were putting out was pretty terrible. Alright, so let's go over these talents. First off, we're going to be using Icy Talons for the increased haste to increase your attack speed by 10% for 6 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. This is going to increase our overall DPS as a Frost DK, give us more attacks, more procs, more everything, especially since with this build, I'm not using like strength control trinkets. I'm using crit stacking at the moment with this build. You'll see why, because a lot of the crits based on Frost or Frostscythe when you're, of course, AoEing a lot of targets, and the more you can get the crit off of Frostscythe, the higher your DPS is going to be, exponentially getting more crits with that. So it really comes into play. And I didn't get these trinkets on purpose. They just kind of fell into my lap. So you know how it is. You just roll with what you get. If I had 2 used trinkets that I could really control my Frost Breath, I'd probably still be rocking that. But because I got this set up, I just had to kind of go with the flow, and I knew if I switched over to the consistent spec using the crit and, of course, proc trinkets instead of, like, raw stats, it would actually turn out to be better. So I just went with it. So that's what we got to do. So going for the level 57 talent, we're using Frozen Pulse. Now Frozen Pulse, it used to proc on no runes. Now you can have 1 rune up and it starts to proc. And it works pretty well because when Frostscythe's down, you're not dealing your AoE, Frozen Pulse comes up and starts hitting, of course, all the mobs, dealing quite a bit of damage. This will also make up for that lag time, the time in between not having runes, that downtime. It's also going to increase your DPS, so you're never going to really drop below a consistent. There's not going to be a huge flux in how much your DPS drops using this spec because of these 2 talents. So that's really great. It's one of the things you really got to do for the elongated fights and raiding, because you might get kicked if your DPS drops too low, even though you started out amazing. Because you know how people look at those things. They look at them at the end and they're like, you either get this right or you're going to be kicked, boy. Alright, so the level 58 talent, you're going to be using Ice Cap. Now, why Ice Cap? Because it's going to close those gaps, those giant gaps you have in between the pulls and cooldowns, making your like your Pillar of Frost 40 seconds instead of 60 seconds. So you're going to have it up as you pull into the next mobs instead of the next mobs after that. So you're going to be pulling that consistent damage all the way through the dungeon, or as in a raid setting, all the way through the raid. Making you, of course, your consistent DPS quite a bit higher than having those big gaps in the big downtime. I have seen people use Avalanche to increase their burst, but I would say most DKs have a lot better consistency going with Ice Cap, and since this is a consistency spec, you probably want to be going with that. As for the level 60 talents, none of these are really important in PvE. I like to go for Winter is Coming, so when I burst in PvE, if there's a lot of mobs, of course I can stun them all, it helps the tank out. I mean, that's probably the best out of those, I'd have to say, for just PvE dungeoning, having a little bit of control. As for the level 75 talent, probably White Walker is going to be your best choice because it's going to give you damage reduction while you're moving away from things in PvE. Like if there's some kind of boss mechanic going on, you got to get out of it. You're popping that. Sometimes you don't make it out in time. Some of you guys, I mean, I've been guilty of it too. But you don't make it out and then you get hit. You got 20% extra reduction. It helps you out a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't one-shot you. As for the level 90 talent, Frostscythe is going to be the best for running like Heroics, Mythic Pluses, things like that. Because of the recent damage buff on it, it deals quite a bit more damage than it used to, and it's going to hit quite a bit harder than Obliterate at the moment. I believe just as like non-buff, it hits for like 40 to 50k harder. And of course, it's going to hit multiple targets, AoE, and there's quite a bit of trash and quite a bit of AoE going on in dungeons at the moment, since we're going through this keystone buff phase of ads. It's quite interesting seeing WoW go through this. As for increasing single target, if you're just downing one boss, go ahead and go Runic. Yeah, just go Runic, guys. Basically, it's going to generate one Runic power on auto attacks, which is going to increase your Runic power, which is also increase your DPS, your Frost Strikes, increasing your haste, and of course, increasing your proc rate on your Obliterates to increase your single target DPS. Now, Frostscythe can lead to a little bit higher peak in DPS because of the procs single target, I have found out, if you're lucky. And it could play out well, but you have to use the procs correctly, single target, otherwise it's not going to work. You really got to get those crits off with Frostscythe, or it's going to drop your DPS compared to using Runic when it comes to single target DPS, and of course raid DPS. And of course raid DPS, you're going to want to go with Runic as for downing bosses. If you're switching talents back and forth during trash and raid bosses using the item, can't remember exactly what it's called, but yeah, you're going to want to use Frostscythe for trash because obviously it's going to down trash really fast. You're going to do quite a bit of DPS. You're going to keep up with Demon Hunters. You're going to keep up with just about any class in AoE. It's really nice using Frostscythe when you have a lot of crit, as I was talking about in earlier videos. Why I wasn't using Frostscythe, of course, my build, I was going for a Mastery Strength build, going for Breath, and just doing a lot of damage. And it was working quite nice, but, the buffs, I can't deny the buffs that they put in. As for the level 100 talent, we're going to be going with Obliteration. Now, the reason we use Obliteration and not Glacial Advance really doesn't do that much damage. It's 138k, it's an AoE. I mean, honestly, Frostscythe is better than that. I mean, consistently, Glacial Advance deals more damage, but you want Frostscythe for the crit, because it deals 4 times more crit, so obviously, go away Glacial Advance. You're quite useless in this situation. Like, you could deal okay damage, but like, no, get out of here. And of course, Breath of Sindragosa you don't want to be using, because of course we're going for the crit of Frostscythe, and of course the extra haste from our Frost Strike, so you don't want to be, counteracting your own DPS using those two abilities. It doesn't really work that well. So of course we're going to go with Obliteration. Now, Obliteration also applies to Frostscythe, so using that consistently, it's only a 1.5 minute cooldown. You can use that on like every other trash pull or so, and it deals a ton of AoE when used correctly, and of course it'll enhance your burst by quite a bit, and I'll show you guys how to do that. Now, I haven't been using this spec for too long, but I'll show you guys how I found out how to deal, quite a bit of DPS on single target, quite a bit of DPS and multiple pulls, and then I'll probably show you guys near the end of the video some like some actual mythic pulls or live pulls or heroic pulls or whatever, showing DPS, and of course how I'm going about doing. Real quick to show you what my cooldown macro is going to be, guys. It's pretty simple. I'm just slash casting Blood Fury. I'm using Pillar of Frost, yeah. I'm using faulty countermeasures, which of course is one of my trinkets, which procs frost damage. Frost decay using frost damage procs. Yeah. Alright, and we're also using a strength potion, of course, to increase our DPS. Very basic macro here, not very hard to use. I'll put that, of course, down in the comments below for you guys so you know what I mean when I say popping cooldowns. The reason I don't put obliteration into my cooldowns is because I want to pop obliteration separately, because during my cooldowns, why I have extra attack power, extra strength, I'm going to want to throw in Sindragosa's Fury, and of course make that deal as much damage as possible. Unless I'm DPSing on trash, obviously, which I'll probably save that for raid bosses most of the time. But guys, let's go ahead and jump into the rotation. When approaching trash mobs, now you notice I got two targets here. A Frost DK deals maximum damage in AoE situations when there's like 4 or more targets. 2 targets, they deal kind of alright cleaving damage. They either like massive amounts of people or one person to distinctively choose how you're going about your rotation, because it can be kind of like a gamble when there's only 2 people. So, I mean, on the good side, our DPS should be about 300 and something K right now. I'm not using buffs, of course, and I'm not going to blow any, I'm not going to use Dragon cooldown to make it proc up to like the 500-600k DPS range. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to pop my macro that I just showed you, and of course I'm going to hit Remorseless Winter to get some cleave damage. Now I got 2 choices. I can either hit Obliterate or I can use Frostscythe off the basis to get runic power. Now what am I getting runic power for? To use Obliteration to get frost strikes to proc insta-crits on my frost scythes on the multiple targets. And of course using frost scythes is going to deal more damage now single target and AoE than using Obliterate will. So that's why of course I'm approaching with that. And the reason why I'm proccing these cooldowns up front is of course none of those require amping up like the Frost Spec does. It doesn't really require runic power to do that. And of course, if I used Peak Burst on it, I would deal more damage overall, which you kind of do on raid bosses, unless you want to early burst to minimize other people's DPS on the charts to be kind of a jerk, but amp up yourself up there. It's kind of a trick people use. Frost Mages are really good at it, things like that. Frost DKs with their Breath Spec are really good at it. But yeah, okay, let's go ahead and go about this. I'm going to run in, this is Trash Mob. Since we have low cooldowns, of course, it says 1 minute, but of course it's only going to be like 40 seconds, so we'll be able to use it way before, you know, the next pull. So I'm going to run in on targets, blow that little cooldown right there, pop Remorseless Winter. I'm going to use Obliterates, because there's a crit. I'm going to use the Froststrike crit. Nope, didn't get it off. Actually just kind of screwed myself using Obliteration, Froststrike. Going to use these Frost Sickle Cleaves. Going to hit for major DPS here. Gonna go ahead and blow Empowered Rune Weapon to actually get runic power to get those last frost scythes off. And as you can see right now, we're pulling about, you know, about 300 and something K. It's not bad DPS. Our gamble wasn't bad this time. Throwing up Remorseless Winter again, using Frost Strikes, throwing out more frost scythes for the major crit damage. You see we're pulling a consistency of about 300k right now. And you notice Pillar of Frost is coming back up, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Pillar of Frost, and of course smack those Frost Scythe crits that are coming back up to deal quite a bit more damage and consistency. Now if there was 4, 5, 6 targets, we would be dealing quite a bit more DPS, probably over the 400k range consistently, through of course the whole heroic mythic raid. So it's a pretty easy spec to do and kind of a gamble if there's multiple targets. Single target I generally use Obliterate to generate runic power faster, of course, and then spam of course my frost scythes when there's multiple targets. And of course Remorseless Winter, when it comes up proc, use it. If you generate up Howling Blast proc, use that, of course, with Obliterate, but your main goal for cleaving in trash mobs is to get off as many frost scythes as possible, and of course, rotate your Pillar of Frost cooldown, and whenever Obliteration comes up, make sure you rotate Obliteration with Frost Strike, with Frost Scythe, and you'll get just absolutely amazing trash mob DPS, as you can see here. So yeah, that's about trash mob DPS. Let's go ahead and talk about single target DPS. Also, within that opener, deciding whether or not to spam Frostscythe or Obliterate right off the bat. Generally, I hit Obliterate so I can hopefully proc Frost, Howling Blast proc, and get off my diseases on the targets before I start AoEing with my Frostscythe cleave. And of course, proccing 2 extra DPS and damage doing so. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get over to the single target. Of course, as a Frost DK, coming into any fight, having more runic power is going to allow you potentially to do a lot more DPS. So remember that, guys. I'm going to come off kind of like a raid setting here where I have no runic power, and then I'm going to build up to burst and then deal damage to this guy, showing you guys how I found out how to deal maximum damage the fastest way. Because, of course, if you don't proc it up fast, your DPS is going to be terrible compared to, of course, the other classes. And it's really going to make you look like you don't know what you're doing. So obviously you got to be doing this correctly. I will be using Sindragosa's Fury. Of course, a lot of our DPS in the beginning to get that correct proc rate is going to rely on how much damage we deal with Sindragosa's Fury. And since I don't have any major proc trinkets, and I'm basically blowing just kind of consistent damage trinkets, and of course I have crit, the chances of a crit are going to be kind of high. Like, I think my crit's around 20%. So what we're going to do here is you kind of open up the exact same way, but instead of using Frostscythe unless it procs, you're going to be using basically Obliterate guaranteed single target, since it's more damage, raw damage, than spamming Frostscythe, unless you get lucky. But you also want to make sure you get off your diseases, which can come from an Obliterate off of proc. Now once you have about 75 runic power, I'd have to say, you're going to go through and use Obliteration. Now, when do you throw off your Sindragosa's Fury? Right after you basically hit the target. You want to proc up your Rune of the Fallen Crusader before you use your Sindragosa's Fury, because that's going to increase the damage by 12% strength. Strength equals attack power scales Sindragosa's Fury, creating more damage. So what we're going to do here, guys, is we're going to, of course, run in on the target. I'm going to blow cooldowns. I'm going to hit Remorseless Winter, basically all at the same time of hitting the target. So I'm going to run in, jump, blow cooldowns, hit that button, throw off my big Fury, and we're going to generate runic power. Right now we got a Frost Strike proc. We totally messed that up, but we're going to go in. I'm going to use Empowered Rune Weapon right now, going to Frost Strike, Frostscythe, and just rotate between Frostscythe until it doesn't proc. Then we're going to go into Major Obliterates, and of course using Frost Strike to increase our consistent DPS. And of course we're dealing about 340k DPS right now. I don't believe we got any major crit off of Dragon. That would have actually procced us a lot higher in DPS. Now the nice thing about this spec is you're sitting here thinking, well, your DPS doesn't seem to be too amazing. Now that's the best thing about this spec. As I told you before, there's not much fluctuation when it comes to the single target damage. And of course I am not using the optimal single target DPS spec. I should be using, of course, the more runic power gain. This one's more for, of course, cleaving down and AoEing. But specifically you guys wanted to know about this spec in PvE, so here's kind of the download to it. I'm not getting a lot of Frostscythe procs, so it's actually bringing down my single target DPS, kind of like I told you it would earlier on. But now I'm getting some procs that'll kind of average out my DPS. Hopefully I get a few more, because there's a lot of downtime right now. And of course, since we're getting a lot of downtime, that means, of course, we're getting a lot of the AoE procs from Frozen Pulse, adding to our DPS at the moment. And of course we're getting faster Pillar of Frost cooldowns, because of course we're spamming Obliterate, Frost Strikes, and Frostscythes, increasing our DPS quite a bit. And of course if I had raid buffs and stuff, this consistency would be quite a bit more. Just switching up the runic power would actually increase your DPS, I'd have to say, from 40 to 50k. On average, with this spec, you should be dealing, at least at my here, around 250 to about 300 plus K in single target rating, which isn't terrible at all. I believe even mythics are being put down with people having about that much DPS. But as you're progressing through mythics and stuff, mythic pluses, the Frostscythe Spec, of course, is going to be the one you're going to be rocking. And of course, if you're going to be wanting to try and deal maximum pressure single target damage using this, you're going to go with Runic Attune, just because it deals, such a crazy amount of damage. But that's going to be it for the boss rotation on that. I think that about covers the guide part of it, guys. Let's go ahead and jump into probably a heroic so I can get in there pretty fast queue and show you guys how we go about doing this on major mob pulls and then probably a boss. So let's do this, guys. Alright, this is going to be just a normal DPS, not blowing cooldowns on this. This is just going to be for AoE. You can see here, we're dealing an alright amount. We're dealing about 400k AoE, not getting a lot of procs, but still managing to pull quite a bit of DPS there as we just kind of mouth through there. Hopefully he massive pulls this. Oh yeah, he's going for it. He's going for it. We're going to deal some crazy. We're actually going to burst, throwing up Remorseless Winter, and then coming out with Frost Strikes. Actually going to use Obliteration to generate Frost Strikes, or Frostscythe crits, of course, because they are not proccing up. And of course, we're dealing some pretty crazy AoE there running this spec. Just going to throw out more Frostscythes there to finish it off. We're peaking over about 600k DPS there. And just spamming these Frostscythes across the board to generate, of course, more runic power and to deal more damage AoE. And we can basically do that over and over again. Now, coming into this boss, I'm not going to have my cooldowns correctly because I was showing you guys on those. So I'm going to wait to one of the other bosses to show you, of course, how to rotate correctly. This should be an alright fight to show you. Alright, going to go and throw up major cooldowns. Again, throwing up Big Dragon. I probably should have hit him first. Going to go ahead and throw up Obliteration and go for the Frost Strike crits, of course. Going to use that Howling Blast real fast because I ended up not having runic power after that last one. Now, just going into regular rotation, and of course, whenever Frost Strike pops up, I'm going to, of course, use that because that's going to be a big chunk of our DPS. Going to use Empowered Rune Weapon at this point. Going to get hit by Solar because I wasn't paying quite enough attention to that. And just trying to keep up consistent DPS on this guy. We shouldn't drop below 300k, I don't think, on this guy unless we get a pretty long Sanctify there. We'll see. We're starting to get one there. I've got AMS up. I should be able to keep up DPS quite a bit through this if I rotate correctly. Because of ranged Frost Strike, I may not drop too much. I'm just going to go ahead and throw up minor cooldowns again using the Frostscythe crits. And, of course, throwing up Remorseless Winter, throwing in them Frost Strikes, and generating more runic power to keep up the consistent DPS. Going to run back in on this guy. Just getting hit with, it looks like, a lot of his AoEs. That's fine. This fight, the DPS wasn't amazing. Of course, it was all single target. Of course, with Frostscythe, you still deal, pretty good damage when it comes to single target boss fights. As I said before, Mythic raids are being pushed through with just 300k plus, consistent DPS. So, I mean, it's really not far off from anything top tier when it comes to single target DPS. And, of course, like I said before, if you're rocking Runic Attune instead of Frostscythe, you can increase that single target by quite a lot. And of course, as you're seeing here, I'm dealing 500k plus DPS AoE on these guys, and I didn't even blow my cooldowns. I should have used my actual cooldowns here, which I probably would have dealt closer to 6 to 700k on that many mobs. So yeah, guys, that's gonna be it for this video. And this spec, if you guys think there's any better way I could burst or open up on something a little faster, let me know. But this is about as much as I know about this spec. And obviously, I've taken it through the raid, I've taken it through Mythic Pluses, I've taken it to dungeons. And I gotta say, this is probably going to be your best bet for pushing content when it comes to grinding through at the moment in PvP. Because those buffs that came out were really nice buffs, guys. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you did, and until next time, this was your boy Hazzed. We're going to finish killing these guys off. Ah!